Now we're looking at fiscal risks. What are the issues facing the public finances in the UK? Well, we know from Rachel Reeves there's quite a lot of them that she's facing right now, but there's more to come in the future. So I'm going to start with the good news, OK? So the good news is that the UK does not have the biggest deficit in the developed world. The bad news is that there's only 4 countries that have bigger deficits than us. Look, and one of them is at war. One of them is Israel, so up there at the top. The other one is run by Donald Trump, so there's the US, and there's France, which has an enormously high deficit, and there's the UK. So we have one of the highest deficits in the world. Deficits, by the way, that's your annual borrowing, government borrowing, and that's very high. So that's one concern that's obviously facing the Chancellor at the moment, but facing other people too. The other is that when you look not just at the annual borrowing, but at the total amount of the national debt, look, here's the average amongst advanced economies, so kind of counterpart economies to the UK. Where do you think the UK is? Higher or low? This is as a percentage of GDP. Well, you've probably guessed already. It's higher, nearly 100% of GDP, which is much higher than the rest. But if you think that's worrying, you might want to look away, because look at the next chart. We're going to kind of zoom out and look out into the future at what the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, so they're the people who do the official forecasts, what they're projecting in the future. Is that red line going to go down? You've guessed it. No, it's going up into the stratosphere. 274% of GDP. That's where they say the national debt is heading in the next few years, raising the question, why? What's contributing to that? Well, there's a number of factors. First of all, the government is spending more money. And we all know this. It spent a lot during COVID, so the higher these bars are, the more the annual spending commitments that you've had. That was COVID. But this is just what happened in the budget just at the end of last year. And that actually was the biggest increase in the spending envelope that we've had in recent years. So spending more money and also borrowing more as well. And this is showing you probably recall this, each year the government says, look, we're going to bring down the national debt in the future. Honest, we're going to bring it down. And then each year, lo and behold, it just kind of goes up. And that's what's happened. So from 2020, 2022, 2023, 2024, 25. And actually, I'm going to show you, this is my favourite chart that the Office of Budget Responsibility has ever produced. Everyone has to have a favourite chart, don't they? This is mine. This is showing you what each year the government says is going to happen to the national debt. They say each year, and they produce this in the forecast, each year they say, look, it'll go up, but then it'll go down. Here's what actually happens. Have a look at this. This is what actually happens. And this is not even like a conceptual chart. This is based on what has happened over the last kind of 15 years or so. They say it's going to go up and go down. In reality, it just goes up and up and up and up and up and up. And that is what's happened in recent years. And if that continues to happen, then we get the chart that you saw a moment ago. But there's other factors as well. So for instance, pension spending is a big part of this, as well as benefit spending. You've got pension spending, particularly on the state pension. So that's kind of crept up from, almost kind of 1-2% of GDP back in the middle of the last century through to 5% of GDP right now. Now, that 5%, OK, it sounds, like it might be quite a lot given that line's going up. But actually, interestingly, the UK relatively low compared with other countries around the world. So this is spending, public spending, state pensions around the world. There's Italy, Greece, France up at the top. But the UK relatively low. And actually, we're quite dependent in this country, it turns out, on private pension spending. So it's private more than public. But even so, focus on that particular thing, which is the government spending, which is part of that national debt issue. That government spending, currently 5%, that's creeping up higher. So this is the projection in the future. So it's heading up to kind of around, or is that kind of like 8% or so of GDP. Again, that's what's contributing, pushing that overall level higher, as well as benefit spending as well. And when it comes to pensions, you've probably heard a lot about, the triple lock. This is a really good illustration. So the triple lock basically guaranteeing that people are going to get a certain increase in their pensions, whether it's inflation, whether it's wages, in the coming years. But here's what would happen would happen right now if there was no triple lock in terms of total government spending on pensions. Here's what actually happens. And the interesting thing, OK, so Rachel Reeves right now facing this problem where she's got a big black hole in the public finances. It might be £20 billion or so. She needs to fill it. The gap between the spending right now with the triple lock and if you didn't have the triple lock, it's about £15.5 billion. She'd be able to fill that hole straight away if there was no triple lock or if there hadn't been in recent years. Just underlining, this stuff does cost quite a lot of money. And it's not just pensions. You've also got things like net zero. So a lot of spending is going to happen on net zero in the coming years by the government. If they're going to fulfill all those promises they made, they need to invest in all the kind of equipment, in all the new renewables and batteries and so on. That costs quite a lot of money in the coming years. But actually, the real cost of net zero for the government isn't that. It's this. So this is the money, the red bits of the bars here. That's the money they would have got in fuel duties. And of course, if everyone is driving electric cars rather than petrol cars, they're not paying the fuel duty. And lo and behold, there's a big hole in the public finances. Another reason why that line is going up and up. Now, final chart I want to show you, which is kind of related to all of this, but I find maybe the worrying one, the most worrying one of all, is this. Because through all of this period, the UK's had what some people see as a secret weapon. And that secret weapon is basically, if you're looking at all of the debt, so governments issue lots of debt, some of it is long-dated debt, so it's a bit like a mortgage that's a 30, 40-year mortgage, some of it's short-dated debt. The UK typically, and this is breaking down how much of the debt is short-term, the red stuff, and how much of it is longer-term, so the darker stuff. The UK, look over here, has traditionally had really quite a little reliance on the short-term stuff, and that matters. Think about if you have a mortgage, you're not constantly having to turn it over, you're not constantly having to renew it. Well, the UK's debt portfolio, the government debt portfolio, it looked like that for a long time. 6% of it at short maturities, which was much lower than every other major country around the world, which meant we had kind of an advantage if we were faced with a financial crisis and suddenly needed to borrow more money. Now look, that's a few years ago, look at how these bars have changed. Look at the UK in particular. This is bring it on to the most recent year. Look at that. The red chunk has gone up. In other words, the UK has become more reliant on short-term borrowing, a bit similar to the rest of the world, raising the question, has this secret weapon suddenly disappeared? So put all of that together and you can see why the OBR is a little bit worried about all of these fiscal risks for the UK.